This episode starts back 3 years before we meet our main guy. There's a battle going on between hunters and some magic beasts on the island. The crew on the boat agree to leave it to the hunters to deal with these monsters. The hunters appear to be overwhelmed, with one being pinned down by a giant ant before he is rescued and healed by another hunter who arrived on the scene. He is joined by two other hunters who make short work of the magic beast. These guys are S-rank hunters. A new white giant ant arrives on the scene and the S-rank hunters join up to defeat the ant. These guys have special abilities, with one of them pulling a Wolverine and the other becoming a Beastman. Beastman uses his strength to kill the ant with its own body part. While this battle is happening in the forest, another hunter is with a different group of hunters tackling another swarm of giant ants. Over 10 years ago, a series of gates had appeared that were linked to an alternate dimension. Magic beasts came through these gates and tried to kill whoever they came across. Only people called hunters could take them on. These hunters came at different levels based on their magical power that they contained. These ranks were S, A, B, C, D, or E rank, with E rank being the lowest. The awakened, no matter how hard they try, will tend to stay within the same level of power and rank. 3 years later, we see a crowd of hunters on a construction site. It appears that they are getting ready for a raid. Mr. Park shouts out a greeting to Mr. Kim, who he hasn't seen in a while, as he had had enough of hunting. While they are talking, Sung arrives at the construction site and is greeted by a few of the hunters. Mr. Park doesn't know who he is, but he thought that based on everyone's reaction to him coming on the raid, that he was somebody strong. Mr. Kim wastes no time in telling him that it's actually the opposite and refers to Sung Jinwoo as the weakest hunter of mankind. He also tells Mr. Park that Sung is so weak that a trip through an E-rank gate had put him in hospital. The hunters believe that any raid that includes Sung will be a pretty easy gate to deal with. He hopes that Sung does not hear this, but unfortunately he heard it all. Sung ends up seeing Joo-hee, who is shocked at how hurt he is, and she tells him that he needs to be more careful. It's not long before they start the raid, and Sung Ji-chul tells everybody that he will be the leader for this raid. Sung Jinwoo checks his knife and mentions that it was all that he could afford for the raids. Three men are talking in an office about the dungeons. They mention the risk and that the hunters use the dungeon to make a living and can be selling the resources that they find inside. The magical beasts have a magic stone that can be collected when the beast is defeated. Back in the dungeon, Jinwoo is happy that he finally got a mana stone, but is then surprised by a goblin that attacks him. He manages to deflect the first strike, but when he tried to kill the beast, his knife is broken and then he gets stabbed by the goblin. Mr. Park comes to his rescue and kills the goblin before Joo-hee begins healing Jinwoo. Jinwoo watches on as the other hunters defeat the dungeon boss while Joo-hee heals his wounds. One of the hunters calls out that they have found another section of the dungeon. It turns out they have stumbled across a double dungeon, which is quite rare. The hunters discuss whether they should explore the other section of the dungeon or report it. It comes down to a vote, with Jinwoo being the deciding factor. He decides to explore the other part of the dungeon. We see some people in the building where they are waiting to be tested for their rank. Outside these rooms, we have some other people that's trying to recruit them to their guild when they have a certain rank. Meanwhile, outside there's a robbery where someone's bag has been snatched. Cha Hae-in flips over the bike and grabs the bag. After giving the bag back to the lady, she is surrounded by a crowd of people who recognizes her. Not wanting to stick around, Cha Hae-in jumps onto the roof of a nearby building. Back in the dungeon, the hunters have been walking down the other path. They check the time as the gate would close an hour after the big boss has been defeated. Jinwoo apologizes to Joo-hee about them having to continue in the dungeon. Joo-hee is not happy as she's worried about Jinwoo's safety, as he is always getting hurt. Joo-hee uses that moment to try and fish for a date with Jinwoo. Looks like she likes him and has been trying to get him to take her out for a meal as an apology for their current predicament. The group arrives at a large double door where they believe the boss chamber to be. Mr. Kim wastes no time in opening said door. Back in the testing center, we see a group of people watching an introduction video in one of the rooms. These appear to be the people who have been granted a rank as they have fully awakened. The hunters enter a dungeon and the room is automatically lit up by candles on the wall. The circular room is surrounded by a bunch of tall statues. The hunters look around and Mr. Song is called out by another hunter to look at some ancient script that is found on a tablet held by one of the statues. Turns out that it is the commandments of the Cartoon Temple. The commandments were to first revere God, second praise God, and third prove your faith to God. While this is being read out, Juhi gets Jinwoo's attention. She tells him that she sees the eyes on one of the statues move. Jinwoo doesn't believe her at first, and it's not long before the doors to the dungeon closes. One of the hunters complains about them exploring the other dungeon and heads to the doors. Before he can even open the door, he is sliced and killed by one of the statues guarding the door. The group starts to panic when they see what has happened to one of their fellow hunters. Jinwoo is panicking and remembering what Juhi told him, he turns to look at the statue. It's not long before the statue's eyes move and look directly at him. Jinwoo tells us about what has happened to him on previous raids, such as when he was separated from everyone else and ended up stranded, as well as being attacked by magic beasts and spending weeks in a hospital as well as being starved. Jinwoo never seemed to have an easy dungeon run, with him barely making any money and not being able to afford any better equipment. Because he has always had to be on alert, he has better instincts for danger and he sensed something was about to happen. Jinwoo calls out to the other hunters and tells them to get down just before the statue shoots lasers at the group. Some hunters were caught in the laser and the group panics more after they see what has happened to some of the group. After looking at the carnage, Jinwoo says they are all going to die. That's the end of the first episode, and what a good start it is. There was definitely a lot of action and you get to learn a little bit about what's happened. But guys, please don't forget to like, comment and subscribe and stay tuned for the next video.